there are many strange and interesting things about the text that we read just before the anthem, the random number, 153 fish that were caught. I know some of you are into numerology, lots of books and articles you can read about that. I'm looking at you, Jeff. Very interesting, but not what I'm going to talk about today. There's the piece about being led off where you don't want to go. Very interesting. Of course, there's this kind of callback to the fire where Peter has denied Jesus, and then he's at a new fire now, affirming his love for Jesus. There's the different Greek words for love, the different ways that he talks about the sheep. Lots of ways we could go, and lots of ways I've thought about this in the past. But today, I think after spending so much time with Peter during Lent and Easter, I've seen this a little bit differently. I don't think that I would have seen it this way otherwise. Like I said, it's easy to notice the kind of threefold, yes, I love you, Jesus, kind of in contradiction to Jesus's three denials just a couple weeks ago. But really, when I read this story, it feels like the whole thing is kind of flashback after flashback, callback after callback to Peter's journey with Jesus. And I don't know if John meant to do that, maybe not, but we're going to do it today because I think it's really kind of beautiful. It starts in the beginning, right? They're fishing. That's where the disciples were whenever they were called by Jesus that first time. And they even get that miraculous catch again, right? There's this callback to Jesus telling them, put your nets back in again, and then to coming up with abundance. This time, they don't hesitate, right? They throw their nets to the other side immediately. And then after that, we get another callback to Peter, jumping off another boat. The last time we saw him jumping off of a boat, he was wanting to walk on water. He was wanting to be like Jesus, right? And he does for a second, and then he starts to sink. This time, he jumps off the boat just as himself. He's not trying to walk on water. He doesn't sink. He swims. He just gets to Jesus as quick as he can. After that, they're back to another meal. Calls back to Jesus' ministry of feeding people with bread and fish before, right? This is not the first time he's done this. Calls back to the meal that they celebrated the night before he was betrayed when Jesus broke the bread, shared a meal with his disciples, except this time it's not a dinner leading up to something dark and ominous, right? It's a breakfast. And it's leading up to who knows what, a new beginning. We get a call back to the question, right? The questions that Jesus asked of his disciples, except this time, instead of asking them, who do you say that I am? Jesus asks them, do you love me? Do you love me? And then, of course, instead of those three denials, no, 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 I don't know the man, I'm not with him, no, we get three yeses. Yes, I love you. Yes, I love you. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Each of these moments through this whole story calls back to a memory, calls back to a defining moment in Peter's life and redeems it, right? Makes it new. Calls Peter back to those moments of his winding journey and says, I trust you. You, skeptical you, bold you, insightful you, offensive you, lost the plot you, fearful you, the you that runs away, the you that comes back. I trust you, Jesus says. I accept you. I redeem you over and over, just as you are. Now, do you love me as I am? Jesus asks. Not as who you wanted me to be, not as a political leader, not as a king on a throne, not as a national hero. Now that you have seen how this plays out, do you love me still? I think is what Jesus is asking. Do you trust me? Do you accept me as I am? There's this beautiful artwork, I don't know if you noticed, on the front of your bulletin. I'm going to point your attention to by Nicolette Peñaranda from our Sanctified Art Bundle. And you can't really tell from here, but this is actually, the original art is, I think, 2 feet by 4 feet. And it's made almost entirely of wool yarn, which I think is just beautiful. But it's got all of these different symbols in it. These are Adinkra symbols. They're West African symbols that are visual representations of concepts or proverbs or aphorisms to call to mind. So you can see kind of in the background this kind of pink line that zigs and zags back and forth. This is a symbol that represents kind of the twisted journey of life. And that's the backdrop for this whole piece of art. And then your eyes might go to the sheep. These sheep are representing Jesus and Peter. Jesus is the Lamb of God and Peter as one of his sheep. And so in this moment where they're having this conversation on the beach, and Jesus is asking him, do you love me? They're both represented here as sheep. And on their chest is the symbol for loyalty and faithfulness. This is a moment where that is front and center. On their face, the kind of swirl with the triangle at the bottom, that is the Adinkra symbol for harmony and cooperation. And that's what they're made of in this moment as Jesus kind of passes the torch to Peter. There are flowers in the foreground. You can see the kind of almost square with the round edges. Those are the symbol for peace and forgiveness and reconciliation. And then you can see above the sheep this kind of sun. It looks kind of like an eye. This is the symbol for God and the omnipotence, the omnipresence, the divine is kind of shining and illuminating this whole scene. Then over to the side, you see the hearts, which usually means love to us, and it does here too, but it means more than that. It means endurance, that kind of love, that kind of patient love. I love this image of this moment because it helps me kind of feel the moment a little more than maybe how I'm used to. It's this full circle moment of Jesus and Peter together, looking back on a journey, excuse me, looking back on a journey with lots of twists and turns, but looking back on it with compassion and with grace and with acceptance. Acceptance is really hard, for me anyway. I don't know about for you. Our culture teaches us a lot about shame, teaches us a lot about a constant need to be better. Just walk into any bookstore and take a look at the self-help section. It's going to take up a big chunk of the store. Our culture tells us that accepting who we are will make us lazy or hinder our growth. But that's a lie. That's a lie, and Jesus exposes it here with Peter. In this picture that we have of Peter and Jesus, we have a picture of radical self-acceptance as we are, not as we want to be or wish we would have been. We have a picture of radical acceptance of Jesus as he is, not as we want him to be or wish he would have been. And that kind of acceptance facilitates Peter's growth. It facilitates ours. It nurtures it. It doesn't hinder it. It's from that place, that viewpoint, that Jesus can say to Peter again, "Follow me. Follow me." Now remember, they're at the same lakeside that they were at when he said it that first time, in the very beginning of their relationship. It's called something different in John, but it's the same lake. He's calling him all the way back to the beginning of their story together. And I wonder, how does this follow me sound different than that first one? How does that hit Peter anew? What are the significant parts in your journey? What are the significant parts in your life with Jesus that he might call you back to if you are standing with him? That he might call you back to even now? What are the moments that flashed through your mind? Maybe when you were baptized, or when you had a mountaintop experience with the divine. Maybe when you did something harmful in God's name. When you walked away, when you came back, when you changed your mind. Some fond memories, I hope. Maybe some cringy memories too, if you're like me. I hope today God calls you back to those moments with compassion and acceptance and a new perspective. I hope that you can hear Jesus' voice saying to you, as it did to Peter, I trust you. I accept you. I redeem you just as you are, as you were, as you will be. Every piece of you. Now, do you love me? He asks. That's the question that matters in the end. Not as you wanted me to be, but as I am. Not as a genie granting wishes in the sky, not as a club to bludgeon your enemies with, not as a divine seal of approval for your nation or your family or your women's basketball team. Not as even a hammer of justice on unjust rulers, not as even a fixer of all of humanity's problems, not as, what did you want him to be? Do you love him as he is? Crucified and risen. If you can, then Jesus invites you, follow me. Follow me. It's not a call we receive just once. It's a call we receive again and again, and it shifts and grows just like we do, just like Peter did. We can look back on our journey with acceptance and compassion, knowing that Jesus was with us all along, right where we were at any given points, when we were wrong and when we were right, when we were naive, when we were harmful, and when we were faithful. God was with us, and we can have compassion on our journey. And that is the good news. That is the grace of God, that we can find peace with God. And that in these full circle moments, like Peter and Jesus are having in the text today, like we see imaged for us in this artwork, like you've had and will have again in the future, in those full circle moments, Jesus looks different. Right? He looks different now than he did when we first met him. And when we come to those moments, decades in the future, Jesus may look different to us then than he does to us now. So having compassion on our whole story, on who we are right now, sets us up for who Jesus is calling us to be, for where Jesus is leading us next. This isn't the end of Peter's story that we heard today. It's not even a plateau, right? His ups and downs are going to continue. I hate to break it to you, in the book of Acts, as he tries to figure out how to lead this growing movement, what it means to be the hands and feet of Jesus when he's not there physically. He makes mistakes and missteps. He puts people to sleep with his preaching. One of them falls out a window and dies. I mean, it gets weird, y'all. He has hardships. He's put in jail. He has high points. He has growth. He has changes of mind and heart, like big changes after this moment still. But it's from this place of radical self-acceptance, radical acceptance of Jesus and love of who Jesus actually shows us God is, It's from that place that our story can continue. It's from that place that our story can expand, even if it does look different than what we expected. Beloveds, whatever your story, whatever your journey, whatever our story as a church, whatever our amalgamation of stories looks like, Jesus offers you, Jesus offers us acceptance, compassion, redemption, again and again. Jesus says, I trust you. I mean, we feel like that might be a little bit crazy, Jesus, but still, he says, I trust you. You can take it from here. Feed my sheep, tend to my little ones, nourish each other, be channels of compassion and care for others. And that starts with yourself, right? Just as you are, Jesus calls you again today. Follow me. Thanks be to God. Amen.